And let's record. Okay. All right, so let's begin. So this is part 2 again of the course that we started last week on the 7 Hermetic Principles. And today we're going to go over the Hermetic Principles number 3, 4, and 5. Okay, they are the principle of vibration, the principle of polarity, and the principle of rhythm. Okay, and so remember, these are not just philosophical statements that were given to us by Hermes a long time ago. But now in this time, we're able to see that these were actually scientific statements. Okay, and so I'm going to do my best to try to synthesize these 3 principles. If you understand these 3 principles, you will really understand the other 7, and they all interrelate. But I feel like these 3 principles are sort of the more, first of all, they're the more practical ones. Okay, they're the easiest ones to grasp, to practice, and they are sort of the center of gravity of the other 7. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so the first principle, the first principle that we're going to talk about today, the principle of vibration. This is principle number 3, okay? And let me turn this light off just so you guys can see it better. Yeah, right? Mm-hmm. Better? All right. Yeah. Okay, so the principle of vibration, okay? And this principle, or this law, states nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates, okay? And so what Hermes Trismegistus was trying to tell us thousands of years ago was that he discovered that everything in the universe, okay, is moving. Everything is vibrating, okay? And this relates to the class, again, to that class that we had about 4 weeks ago, which I recommend that you guys check out. It's called Mantra Yoga. And in that class, we said that everything that surrounds us, the things that we call matter, are made up of molecules, are made up of vibrating things. Those things we can call atoms, we can call cells, we can call photons of light, whatever we want to call it, right? And I mentioned in that class that science has now been able to corroborate, trying to find the smallest particle of matter, and they haven't been able to do so, right? So the things that we see that appear very solid to us are not. At the end of all of this, when we zoom into matter, all that they can find is energy. All that they can find is light, right? And so one of the practical things that we can grasp from this, that you can read from the Kabbalah, is that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying states of vibration. Okay, so what are they trying to say? To illustrate this situation is that, for example, this mug looks very solid to us, right? We consider this matter, okay? The space between you and me, we don't consider matter. We consider it space. Nevertheless, there are particles, right, that are moving in between us that we cannot see, that we cannot perceive, and so we don't give it the concept of matter. A cloud, for instance, we don't really give that the concept of matter, right? But nevertheless, it is all energy in a different state of vibration. Okay, and so in order to understand this a little bit, let's get to this quote by Albert Einstein. And he taught this, or he found this scientifically with the quote, with the equation E equals mc squared, right? What he was basically saying with this formula, or what he was trying to prove with this formula, was that energy equals energy is the same as matter, but vibrating at a certain frequency. Okay, So again, the difference between this mug and the empty space that surrounds us is that the particles in this mug seem to be closer together, and they are vibrating, okay, at a speed that our eyes can perceive, okay? And a great example of this could be, for instance, if you see my hand, okay, it seems pretty solid. But if I start moving my hand and I started moving fast and fast and fast, eventually the hand will seem like it disappears from right in front of your eyes, right? Obviously, we know that the hand's still there, but why can't we see it? Well, because because the hand is vibrating at such a speed that it's too fast for our eyes to perceive, okay? So now let's take this concept, okay, and expand it to other things. Okay, and this is why throughout time and history, all of the different traditions have told us, right, that there are things right in front of us that we cannot see. God, for instance, angels, demons, right, heavens, hells, right? So there are, in other words, there are other things that are considered things or beings, we can say. There are beings and there are even other physical things that are here in our space, but we are not physically able to perceive them, right? As we know, our eyes can only perceive a certain spectrum of light. Our ears can only hear a certain spectrum of sounds, right? A dog can hear certain sounds that we can't. And so we wouldn't say that they're not there, we just simply can't perceive them, right? So let's open our minds, let's use this concept and open our minds to begin to understand the world around us from the perspective of the Hermetics, okay? The Hermetics were these, are considered those that study the Hermetic teachings, okay, that come from Hermes Trismegistus, okay? Or also we can use the same concept of as a Gnostic or as an esoterist, okay? So an esoteric sees the world from this perspective. Scientists are now sort of catching up with the things that the ancients knew for millennia, and I find this very fascinating, okay? So Albert Einstein said, everything is energy, and that is all there is to it, okay? There is no such thing as physical matter, okay? Everything is energy. And then he says something very interesting, match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality, okay? It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. I love that he ends it that way, because it's not like, this is not speculation, this is not a theory, this is actually physics. This is what we proved almost 100 years ago, not 100 years ago, and we're still sort of stuck with this mentality that we live in a physical world where the only things that we can perceive with our five physical senses are the only things that are there, right? Okay, so if we open ourselves to this, right, as Albert Einstein says, there are other realities, right? Or at least he's implying that. And this is what has been, this is a concept that comes from all of the different spiritual traditions have been telling us, okay? And so to expand more on this principle or law, I like to refer them as laws, okay? Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates, okay? At the most fundamental level, the universe and everything which comprises it is pure vibratory energy, manifesting itself in different ways, right? The universe has no solidity as such. Matter is merely energy in a state of vibration, okay? So I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this to another octave, okay? And I'm going to claim that your physical body is not the only thing about you that we can refer to as matter. Your emotions and your thoughts can be considered matter, okay? And that's where the practical aspect of this law comes into place, okay? And I can recommend you guys to look into something called the Maharishi effect, okay? Where this was some studies that they did back in the 60s and 70s on transcendental meditation, okay? And what they did was fascinating. They actually got thousands of meditators, okay, together in particular cities, and they set these meditators to meditate in a particular time in a particular city, right? And they did this all over the world. Specifically, they did it in 10 cities in the United States, okay? And they wanted to see if meditation actually brought about a change in the environment, okay? If a person's feeling and a person's thoughts or thought would actually affect their physical environment. And we talked a little bit about this when we talked about the first principle of, when we talked about the first principle, the principle of mentalism, and which we said that the all is mind, right? And that everything that we experience in life are different modifications of this substance or this energy, okay? So this cup is a materialization or an externalization of a thought. This is crystallized thought, okay? And so if that is the case, we should be able to prove it, right? And these studies proved exactly just that. They actually found out that in the cities where there were these group of meditators, for the hours, for the days, okay, they were meditating in these cities for about 7 days straight or 5 days straight. They found out that in each one of the cities, when during the days that these meditators were there, okay, physical things actually happen in the city, okay? All of the cities, the crimes dropped, accidents dropped, and a bunch of other very interesting examples. So they were actually, they did this in one of the cities in the Middle East that was in conflict at the time. I think it was in Palestine, and they actually saw that those 5 days or however long they did it, they were actually the most peaceful days in the entire war, right? So very interesting. I recommend you guys look into it. It's called the Maharishi effect. You can just look it up, Maharishi effect videos on YouTube, and you can find information about that. Okay, and so this is where we can find the practical aspect of this teaching. Okay, so let's go back to this first slide. Okay, that nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. Okay, and the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, and mind, and even spirit result largely from varying states of vibration. Okay, so your thoughts and your emotions all have different states of vibration. Okay, some thoughts obviously are negative, and some thoughts are positive. Okay, and that is obviously affecting you physically, and is affecting the world around you, as we talked about last week when we were talking about the principle of mentalism, that your thoughts affect your immediate reality, and also the principle of correspondence, right? That principle says, as above, so below, as within, so without. Or in other words, that your internal reality is projected out into the world, and so what you see in the world is what you have within yourself, right? And so that theory or that principle, that law, invites us to reflect about the things that we see around us, and it invites us to see the world as a mirror of ourselves. Okay, that's a very interesting concept, which we're going to expand more on the fifth law, the law of rhythm. Okay, that since everything that we see outside of ourselves is a reflection of ourselves, that every time that I see something positive or something negative, I will see that as a sign that I need to comprehend that even deeper, or that's something that I need to work on, or transform or transmute, okay, or embody, okay. And we call these the mirrors, okay, and that's essentially what karma is, and that will be principle number 6, which we'll talk about next week. Basically, karma is a mirror in which we should see ourselves, right? Whatever things happen are the result of things that you did in the past, and they're an invitation for you to correct that, okay? But I'm getting ahead of myself here. So let's move on with this theory, okay? And here's the practical aspect of that, okay? Samuel Veur says, have you ever reflected on what your level of being is, okay? A level of being is exactly your way of being in a particular moment. a particular way of thinking, feeling, and acting. Okay, that's your level of being. Okay, and so he says, whatever we are internally, generous or petty, selfless or stingy, violent or peaceful, chaste or lustful, attracts the various circumstances of our life. So then again, like we said in the first two principles, if you want to change your life, if you want to change the world around you, where do you need to start? You need to start within you, from within, right? And that's why Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. It would be pointless for you to change all of the things around you, right, if you don't change yourself, okay? And this is why, for instance, we have many people that have been sold the idea that once you accomplish everything in life, that once you have all of the things that you ever dreamed of, you know, the house, the car, the $1 million, the perfect wife, the kids, once you have all of that, then you'll be happy, right? But if that was true, why are so many rich, wealthy people committing suicide, right? Because they have been misled to believe that happiness is out there on the things that we possess, okay? Happiness is inside of yourself, or we all have an inner source of happiness that we have to tap into. If you are not able to tap into that inner source of happiness, nothing that you have outside of yourself will ever make you happy, right? And so then this is some of the things that Samuel Viewer is trying to teach us with this quote, okay? And it applies obviously here because, like I said, every thought, every emotion that you have has a vibratory, is a vibratory state. And if we sort of, I think everyone here would be familiar with the law of attraction, right? This concept that everything that happens in your life, you attract it in some way or another, right? They say that your subconscious is always attracting things to your life, even those things that you don't even want, right? Even bad things, you are attracting them because in your subconscious, somehow you have that in your subconscious, and so you attract it, right? And so then Master Samuel just invites us to reflect on this, right? Analyze your life. See what kind of life do you have, okay? And the second part, in this same chapter from the book Revolutionary Psychology, he continues saying, you know, a person that is addicted to alcohol will always find himself in bars, will always find himself surrounded by people that have that level of being, right? A lustful person will always find himself surrounded by lust, surrounded by adultery, surrounded by drama, and so forth, right? And if those people stop being, right, give that vice up, then something else will show or will fill that empty space that have left, right? And so let's get a little bit into the next law to understand this a little bit, because the next law states, or it's called the principle of polarity, okay? And here, this law states that everything is dual, okay? And everything has a dual aspect, okay? Everything in nature, and you know, I love that he says everything a lot of times to sort of drill this in, that everything, and from an esoteric perspective, from a spiritual perspective, a thing in itself is a small universe, okay? As we talked about in the principle of correspondence, right? We are within the universe is also within us. We are an extension of the universe, and vice versa, right? So the universe is like a holographic creation in which I am, or within me, you can find all of the things that you find in the universe, okay? And so every little thing, a human being, an animal, a plant, a planet, a solar system, is an order of things. It's an order, okay? Or it's a world in itself. And so within each one of those worlds, within a planet, within a solar system, within a universe, within an individual, we have these principles, okay? And so this principle states that everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites, okay? Like and unlike are the same, Opposites are identical in nature but different in degree. Okay, and that's where I'm going to connect this principle now to the previous principle. Okay, remember that. Opposites are identical in nature but different in degrees. Okay, extreme means all truths are but half truths, all paradoxes may be reconciled. Okay, so what is it? What do they mean when they say that opposites are identical in nature but different in degree? Okay, so the concept here is that when we have two seemingly opposing things, like love and hate, okay, what this law is trying to tell us is that really those are two states of one same thing, but vibrating at different frequencies. So what is hate if not the expression of love transformed or distorted, right? So we can say that love is a very high vibration of thought, of feeling, okay, and of energy. And hate is that same energy, but distorted, okay, and or vibrating at a lower sphere, okay. And this is why it's very easy for us, as you've probably experienced, to go from love to hate or from hate to love in a matter of seconds, right? And so this is the practical key of this principle, as it is stated in the quote below. It is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love through the art of mental alchemy. Okay, and that's what we're here to learn. Really, this is the foundation of the Gnostic teachings, is to teach us how to transform ourselves, to teach us how to transform or change inferior vibrations into superior vibrations, okay, through the art of mental alchemy. Okay, the word mental, I don't have to explain. Alchemy is a word that comes from the ancient, from ancient Egypt, okay, and also it's a word that the Greeks used, okay, which basically means to fuse oneself with divinity, okay. Allah, okay, the first word it's come from the Arabic tradition. The first two letters al refer to Allah, God, and the second part of that word, chemi, or comes from what we know now as chemistry, right? Is so Allah and chemistry. So to fuse oneself through chemistry, okay, to fuse oneself with Allah, okay. In the alchemical tradition, they refer to the highest goal of alchemy is to transmute lead into gold, okay? And this is what, psychologically speaking, we refer to as the complete transformation or transmutation, okay? The word transmute means to transform to a higher octave, okay? So the transmutation of our inferior nature into our higher nature, our divine-like nature, okay? And so at this point, we have to begin to talk about, you know, the duality that we have within ourselves, okay? And this is where we can get into the concepts that we teach here in the Gnostic tradition about the inner duality that all human beings have, okay? So we say that all of us have this dual aspect, this dual nature, okay? We have light and darkness within ourselves. Okay, and I think we can all agree on that, right? You've probably seen it in yourself. We all have things within ourselves that are wonderful, that are good, that can be aligned with light, with divine principles, and we also have darkness within ourselves. Okay, and so this is what has always been represented in all of the different spiritual traditions as God and Satan, right? God being the light, Satan being the darkness. Okay. So what does that mean psychologically within us? That means that in a given moment, okay, you are either connected with the light and expressing it, or you are vibrating and connecting with the darkness.
What about both?
Huh?
What about both? What about being connected with both at the same time?
Well, we have both within ourselves, for sure, right? And you can say, based on that and based on the law of, based on this law of polarity, that you are expressing both at the same time, but in a particular degree, right? You are expressing more of something than other, right? So when you're vibrating, when you elevate the vibration of your thoughts and your emotions, okay, you align yourself more with the higher aspects of light. And so then we have something like generosity, for instance, right? When you are vibrating at a higher level, you are a generous person, okay? And when you start to go down in vibration, okay, then that generosity goes away and you begin to think more in terms of me and myself, right? You go from being altruistic to being selfish, okay? And that's where we go into our dark aspect, okay? And so the light aspect we call the consciousness, okay? Or the essence, or the Buddhata in the Buddhist tradition, okay? Which is the psychic material, okay? Or the soul in the Christian tradition, okay? The consciousness is our immortal and transcendental aspect. It is the source of our true individuality, wisdom, love, virtue, okay, happiness, and source of life, okay? This has been represented or talked about in the Christian tradition, or the Christian tradition, as the virtues versus the vices, okay? So we have the virtues, which are related to chastity, which is related to purity, moderation or self-restraint, generosity, which is related to kindness, will, which is integrity or related to integrity, meekness or peacefulness, charity, which is related to compassion, and humility, which is related to modesty, right? So those are, sort of narrowing down, into 7 concepts or 14. The qualities of our higher divine nature, of our light aspect, okay? And we say in the Gnostic tradition that this aspect needs development, it needs growth, and this is why the need to awaken here and now, right? We need to awaken this light within ourselves, because most of this light is actually trapped within what we call the animal ego. And as a matter of fact, we say in the esoteric traditions that most of what we express on a daily basis is actually our ego, okay? Our animal ego, our inferior, our dark aspect, okay? So let's get into that. So what is the animal ego? Okay, the animal ego in the Gnostic tradition is not the same as the concept that they have in modern psychology about the ego. It's slightly different, but it basically represents everything that opposes the light. Okay, so instead of chaste and pure, we look at we're lustful. Okay, which is related with sexual degeneration. Okay, and so we have gluttony, which is overindulgence, greed, which is related to avarice, sloth, right, which is related to, or it's the same as laziness, wrath, which is anger, envy, jealousy, pride, vanity, arrogance, etc. Okay, those would be light manifesting in a conditioned way through us. Okay, and so pride, even though in this culture is spoken about as something good, at the bottom of it, it is a psychological attitude that has a center of gravity around me, right? And that's the main difference between the psychological ego and the consciousness. That most of these, or all of these states of being revolve around me. Okay, I am the center of the world, and as long as I have my way, I don't care about the rest.
And you call that darkness.
Yeah, that'll be the darkness. That'll be everything that is separate from, from taking others into consideration is the darkness. Okay, and again, these are concepts that I put here just so that we can have an idea of what those things are. Okay, but in essence, the ego, it is that aspect of ourselves that from which ignorance emanates. Okay, it is the source of hate, unhappiness, and death. Okay, the ego is like an illness of the soul. okay? And I have here at the bottom, that's just, a little reference that this is the mythological battle that we see in all the different traditions, right? We see Christ versus the devil, Horus versus Seth in the Egyptian tradition, Neo versus Myth in the movie The Matrix. In the Bhagavad Gita, we see Arjuna's battle against his actual family members, right? Which is it's a very interesting myth in which Arjuna, which represents the Christ, okay, that divine nature, Krishna represents that divine nature, is telling Arjuna, who's the physical personality, to go to battle against his own family, armies that are led by his family members, right? And it's always interesting, because how can you like intellectually find a logic behind that, right? But obviously from an esoteric perspective, we can begin to understand these myths because we know that all of these myths were written in a symbolic way, right? And the characters in the myth all represent archetypes that are within yourself. And so in that case, Arjuna has to go to battle with those beings that he has called his family, okay? Like hate, right? Hate is our cousin, right? Anger is our brother. Envy is our uncle, and so forth, right? So we've made those psychological states our own families because we are, or we're not seeing our true reality as it is. And once we begin to see our true reality, then we have no use for any of these down here.
Ever?
Okay? Ever. Yeah. Once you have a glimpse, once you actually experience, okay, peace, you will never see the use, okay, of using anger, of using hate, okay, which cannot be confused by force, okay, because sometimes we have to use force, right? Like for instance, I can speak loudly to someone, right? I can raise my voice when I'm speaking with someone, okay? If I need to get a point across, but only inside of myself, I can know if the source of that is anger or if it is humility, okay? It's a very tricky subject. It's a very fine line, but you can kind of see these things when you see Jesus, for instance, going into the temple and using a whip to kick out the infidels, not the infidels, but those that are profaning the temple, for instance, that have made the things of God or that have made a business from the things of God, from sacred things, right? If someone comes into your house, for instance, and they want to, rob your house, steal your house, what are you going to do? You're going to say, I'm spiritual now, and, compassion, om, and pray to divinity, to ask that, to ask divinity to take that thief away from your house? No. You're going to use force, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, right? So anyway, it's a very fine line, but I just wanted to point this out because it is an important psychological concept from the Gnostic perspective, and this is precisely where we can begin to do the work. Okay, so the darkness is considered it's the same consciousness, but with a particular condition. So in other words, we have been conditioned, okay, to react to certain events of life with anger, okay, and we have forgotten that we can respond to those events with peacefulness, with serenity, right? And as you do the work, as you do the psychological work of mental alchemy, or we can call it mental transmutation, you begin to see that with the force, with the energy of the mind, you can, at any given moment, expel, okay, the presence of any of these inferior states of being, or manifest, right, these inferior states of being, okay? Because ultimately, it is your mind, the one that is interpreting the environment and telling your physical body or telling yourself, you need to be angry in this moment, you need to be peaceful, and so forth, right? And so this is why the mind plays a key role in this, and why, for example, in the Buddhist tradition, they pay so much attention to working with the mind. Okay.
Do you guys have a concept of a good ego, like good ego?
Yeah, they're good egos. Sure, they're egos that want to do good for instance, the ego of vanity would want to do good so that I look good, you know? And so it is okay, it's fine to a certain degree, but ultimately the ego is chaos. And this is a concept that we will obviously explore more as we go deeper into the teachings. But we do like to make that clear distinction that everything that emanates from consciousness, from spirit, from your higher self creates order in the world, and everything that emanates from the ego creates disorder, okay? Okay, and this is, I'm actually gonna go to this last slide here. The Bhagavad Gita tells us, in relation to what I was talking about today, that the mind is the key because the mind will allow you to identify or allow a certain vibration to express itself through you in a given moment, right? The Bhagavad Gita says, when the mind follows the wandering senses, it carries away one's discrimination or consciousness, as the wind does a ship under water, right? And so what the Bhagavad Gita is telling us is that we need to learn how to use our mind and control our mind and not be used by the mind, which is what usually happens to us, right? Do we have control of our mind? No, most of the time not, right?
I wish.
Yeah, right? That would be the day, okay? And so what the Bhagavad Gita is telling us, okay, is that if you learn to use your mind in the proper way, you will be able to always manifest that higher aspect. You will always be able to experience the world and respond to the various circumstances of your life with love, with compassion, with altruism, right? Instead of how we've been conditioned. Okay, so this is the key element of these teachings. And as we said, the mind has vibratory states related to these levels of being. And so this is why here this is why the many different traditions give us mantras, prayers, right? Things that help us for a moment to liberate our mind or to elevate the vibration of our mind so that we can have a broader perspective, so that we can align ourselves with our higher nature, okay? And this is precisely the purpose of mantras, okay? And here's where I gave a whole class about this a few weeks ago. And so if you go on that video that I showed you, you're gonna understand a little more. But in essence, mantras, Samuel Viewer tells us, are phonetic combinations made with wisdom. Okay, so a mantra is a word, is a sentence. A mantra is a prayer. Okay, whether it is silent prayer or prayer through words. Okay, because in essence, a mantra is a state of vibration, of energy that you trigger within yourself that allows you to free your mind, as it says here on the bottom, right? The word mantra comes from the first three letters, the word man, which means to think or mind, so man is related to mind, and triya, which means to protect or to free, okay? So the word mantra is freedom of the mind. This is why, we'll do a meditation practice at the end of this so that we can experience it, okay? Another way to really see the practical aspect of this principle of polarity is that you will be able to experience, if you give yourself the task, and actually, as a matter of fact, you've already experienced it, like I said before, from in a given moment, you're in one state and then you transform yourself into another state, or you experience another state, right? Like you go from being angry with someone to being in love with that person or feeling love with that person again, right? This happens if you're in a relationship. This happens all the time, whether it is a romantic relationship or a family relationship or a friend, right? Let's say a friend does something that you find offensive, right? In that moment, you have the concept that your friend is offending you, and so you get angry. But if the person catches himself, right? If your friend catches himself and he says, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. That was totally uncalled for. We've all experienced this, right? What happens automatically just because of a new concept, right? The way that you are interpreting this person's new attitude, that emotional state of anger fades away and you feel, okay, that's cool. And then you feel okay with your friend, right? You feel like, oh, all right, it was a nice moment of connecting, right? You experience love, right? And what happened? It was just your mind that interpreted this situation as offensive and this situation as good, right? And so you can see here all of these principles beginning to manifest in a practical way. The law of mentalism, right? And you experience the law of vibration, because when your friend offends you, when you feel offended, how does anger feel? Do you feel tense? Do you feel heavy, right? You can actually feel the vibration of anger within you, right? That's a state of vibration that you can experience, that you can feel in your body, in your emotions, in your mind, and it actually limits the way that you think, right? When someone is angry, they can only think in terms of, that anger. And then there is that polarity that we can begin to experience, right? How you can go from this state to a higher state or vice versa, right? You can go from a higher state into an inferior state. And so then the question is, right, if I have the power to make you feel good or make you feel bad in a given moment, who's in control, right? Wouldn't you like to be in control of your own happiness and your own life? Because if I'm able to press a particular button and make you do this, then I know that I can manipulate you. And this is how they manipulate us, really, in this society, right? This is why we have people, politicians giving certain speeches in a particular way, because they know that we are emotionally manipulable beings, right? And so this principle allows us to begin to take control of our own lives, right? By knowing, hey, wait a second, I have a choice. I have a choice on how I can interpret this situation based on how I think about this situation, right? And so in a given moment, you can transmute or transform one inferior state for a superior state. Okay? And that's really the purpose of this class, of this lesson. Okay, and as we learn to meditate, we learn to use our minds. Okay, and as you learn to use your mind, you have more control over it, and you have more control over your states, over your vibratory states, and then you begin to have more control of your life, because if your internal states attract circumstances into your life, then there you go, right? Okay. All right, so now let's go on to the last principle for today, which is principle number 5, the principle of rhythm, okay? This principle states that everything flows in and out, or out and in. Everything has its tides, okay? All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything, okay? The measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates, okay? So this law is trying to tell us something. It's trying to make us aware of this, or this principle is trying to make us aware of this law that there is in the universe that that influences all beings: planets, suns, stars, human beings, animals, and so forth. Okay, this is what in Gnosis we call, and Nietzsche referred to this as the law of eternal recurrence, or eternal return of all things. That everything is in a constant flow. Okay, going from one pole to the next, right? From one pole, right? So this is our life. We're constantly from here to there, from here to there. Okay, and so the quote at the bottom here says the Hermetics cannot annul this principle, right? It's just a natural law. It's just a natural principle, but they have learned how to escape from its effects upon themselves to a certain degree by applying the mental law of neutralization. Okay. And so let me just give you some examples of this law so we can understand a little better, right? We say that life is a constant repetition of events, right? Observe nature, okay? Remember, bring the concept of the second law, the law of correspondence, or the principle of correspondence that says, as above, so below, as within, so without. That law invites us to see patterns in nature. That's why Da Vinci said, learn to see, realize that everything connects to everything else, right? So whatever you see outside of yourself is related to something that is inside of yourself, and vice versa, okay? And so if outside of ourselves we see seasons that come in a cyclical manner, on a rhythmic manner, we see planets revolving around suns, suns revolving around other suns, we see history repeating itself, okay? And this is a whole other lesson that you guys can probably find in one of my YouTube videos. But if you study history, right, what do we know? History repeats itself over and over and over again. Why? Because we don't seem to learn, right? In the Quran, there's Muhammad said, God has created all beings and they will be born over and over again until they realize the reason for their existence. Meaning, he's saying that we keep returning to this life over and over again, and we don't liberate ourselves. We never go to heaven, right? Or, you know, the absolute, whatever you want to call it, because we don't realize that we're in this sort of cycle, this never-ending cycle. You guys probably saw the movie Groundhog Day, right? Groundhog Day. That's what that movie talks about. It talks about this law, that things just keep repeating. And things repeat over and over in our lives, and we don't see it, okay? We see this law in the seed that becomes a plant, the plant that becomes fruit, and the fruit bears, right? Or the fruit, from within the fruit, we have a seed. So we see this process, right, over and over again. And so then, if we see that outside of ourselves, let's take this inside, okay? Are there certain habits, thoughts, feelings, okay, that we see manifesting in our lives on a cyclical nature, in a cyclical way? And even lives, right? We can expand this even later. We'll talk about, you know, how we have many lives, and every time we're returning and returning because we're trying to learn something, okay? But again, the practical use of the law of rhythm, or the principle of rhythm, is telling us that there are patterns in life that keep repeating over and over again, and they will keep repeating until you do something about it, right? And so what does that mean? You ever have the case of the Mondays, right, that many people talk about? No, you don't have a Monday to Friday, John?
No, what is it?
The case of the Mondays, right? People don't feel like they want to go to work on Mondays and stuff like that. Okay, so you'll see that's a repetitive thought, a repetitive feeling, a repetitive state of being, right? Which, you know, that you have a similar feeling around 3 p.m. if you have a 9 to 5, you know, or around 3 or 4, you get really excited because it's almost time to go, or you look at the watch at 1 and it's like, you know, I still got 3 or 4 hours to go, right? All of those emotions that we experience during the day, during our lives, they're always repeating themselves. And we don't realize that we can do something about it. And when you do something about it, guess what? Life is going to actually change, okay? Because let's say you are a grumpy person that goes to the office every Monday in a grumpy attitude, okay? And everyone knows already that you're going to be grumpy on Mondays. And they're going to treat you in a certain way. But what if you become aware of this and you say, wait a second, why am I always grumpy on Mondays? You know what? Today, I'm actually going to feel happy. Why? Because let me look at how many blessings I have in my life. I have a house, which millions of people in this world don't have, unfortunately. I have a car, I have food, I have people that love me, right? We have so many things to be happy about in this life, but we choose to focus on the bad things that we have, or the things that we don't have, right? That's all part of mental alchemy. And so what you can do is just say, you know what, today I'm not going to have the case of the Mondays. I'm going to shake it off, and I'm going to show up to the office, and I'm going to be happy. And guess what? People are going to treat you in a different way. You might actually attract different people that didn't talk to you on Mondays, and now they're actually, oh, this guy, you know, is different, right? Or if you don't take a shower, you take a shower on Monday, and then, you know, they're going to get closer to you that day. Anyway, so that is the law of rhythm, right? Begin to pay attention to, if it's hard for you to begin to see patterns psychologically, begin to pay attention to the life around you. Begin to pay attention to your dreams, right? And this is something that I didn't get to talk about in the law of correspondence, right? As above, so below. And that dreams are dramatizations of how you're living your life on a daily basis, okay? Or in other words, a dream is a movie, okay, or an interpretation of your psyche of how you've been living your day. And so if you've been living your day under fear, then you're going to have nightmares. If you've been living your day on a very joyful nature, then you're going to have dreams related to that. You might see yourself flying. You might see yourself, you know, in a beach, hanging out, you know, being loved by people and so forth, right? Your dreams will your dreams illustrate psychological states lived throughout the day. Okay, this is why in the program we will also talk about the science of dreams, lucid dreams, and the therapeutic aspect of dreams, right? Okay, so that's that. So what do we have so far? To summarize, we have the principle of vibration, right? That tells us that everything that we experience are different states of one same thing. You experience yourself in different states of vibration throughout the day, okay, throughout your life. You experience yourself with certain thoughts, emotions that have a particular vibratory affinity, which are attracting things into your life. And based on that, right, you go into the law of polarity, which makes you feel on one end of the spectrum, on the other, right? Makes you feel that you are connected to this higher aspect of or this lower aspect of yourself, okay? And then finally, with the law of rhythm, you begin to realize, oh, not this, you begin to realize that these patterns are repetitive and that you cannot escape this law of repetition, but you can annul the influence that it has on you, okay? And the law of mental neutralization means just that, okay? To realize that you're in this swing, and what you want to do is to balance yourself, to find the center, to find the balance, okay? And we can do this through meditation. We can do this through simple breathing exercises, okay? And so one very practical exercise that I can give you in relation to this is that of the breath. It's that of finding a rhythm to your breath, okay? And you'll notice that most of the time we are breathing unconsciously, okay? And so when we begin to breathe in a natural, relaxed way, okay, you'll actually begin to see that your thoughts, that your thoughts slow down, okay? Your body begins to feel more relaxed, okay? Your emotions begin to relax and so forth, okay? And this is why we'll do a practice in a few moments, because I think this is really all I have to share in regards to this, okay? I hope that I've explained these clearly, and you feel like you have something to grasp. There are many things that we can talk about here that that we cannot get into because of the limited time that we have. But in the next classes, we're going to get more in depth into not only the spiritual aspects and explanations of all of these laws and psychological ones, but also how modern science is now beginning to corroborate all of these things that the ancients were telling us about the world, about creation. Okay? All right. Any questions, comments that you have? I'm going to stop sharing now, and I will open the room for any questions before we go into the meditation, or comments. Anything that you feel that you feel the need for me to expand more on?
Actually, I think this course, I already did that one. I remember it.
You did this particular course?
No, in Australia. I remember it.
Oh, okay.
Just that you brought it up, so I remember it now.
Cool. Well, yeah, I mean, and as you know, I mean, you're familiar with the teaching, so all of the concepts that I'm talking here are, the concept of the level of being, the concept that the external world is a reflection of you, right? The law of recurrence, right? All of those are themes that we touch upon, and I feel like You know, there are basic themes, and that's one of the beautiful things about Gnosis, that it allows me and it allows every one of us to see these same concepts that have been explained throughout time and history by different spiritual teachers, right? In different ways, but they're all talking about the same thing. They're all telling us the same message. They're all teaching us the same things. And we still don't seem to get the message, right? And so this is what I like about Gnosis, that Gnosis focuses on the similarities, right? That all of the various traditions around the world have, and how we can take these teachings and make them practical, right? How can we practice these teachings? I've heard lectures about the 7 Hermetic principles, about the book, The Kabbalion, from different people, okay? But sometimes you hear these lectures and you can't see how you can apply these to your life, right? And that's why I decided, let me make a course so that we can know how to apply these teachings practically in our lives, right? So I hope that you have found this to be true, and that you can leave here with a sense that you actually grasp something practical. But of course, the actual practice is going to be now when we do the meditation, so that we can learn how to, or that we can experience those laws within us, okay? And experience, obviously, yourself working or using these energies, transmuting your thoughts, transmuting your states of being. Okay, so no questions? Anyone online? You can unmute your mic. Any comments? No? All right. That's fine. That's fine. Nobody has any questions, and you all got it. Perfect.
I do have something to say, Christian.
Oh, Lindsay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really like what you said about the patterns that go on throughout the day. I think it brings me awareness of like, oh yeah, when I go to work on Sunday night, I'm like going backward, but I'm like, I don't want to go, and I keep repeating this thing, and having the chance of like stopping that, being aware of it and changing it, it's really good. And I just wanted to thank you for that. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
You said a key word there, awareness, okay, which is something that we covered today. But awareness is the key, and you'll be surprised as to how much you can actually change a state of being by simply bringing awareness to it. And this is, mindfulness is such a, catchy discipline right now. Everyone's talking about mindfulness because of the power of that. As soon as you just simply bring awareness to a particular state of being, an emotion, a thought, you will begin to see that thought, that emotion begins to loosen up its grip on you, right? By simply becoming sort of a passive, neutral observer of your emotions, of your thoughts, they sort of begin to have less of an influence of yourself, right? And I know you've experienced this, and so I recommend you guys put it into practice, and we'll do a little meditation on that. But I thank you for bringing that up. That's a key word there, awareness, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, so without further ado, if there are no more questions, let's get to it. All right, let's get comfortable. Just before we start, let's please make sure that we all have our mics muted in case something happens on your end. We don't, it doesn't disturb us here, okay? Because we have you on speaker, and it'll be loud.